Welcome to Picks with the Professor, sponsored by Wager Lab, the show where a real statistics professor and his friends give you sports betting tips. I am your host, the Professor, and I've built mathematical models to predict various sports outcomes that I call sideline. Know more about the models in the course of this episode, which is set to cover the entire dang NCAA tournament bracket. If you don't know my history with brackets, I'm not a big bracket fan. I think survivor pools are awesome. If you're in a survivor pool, pat yourself on the back, you're doing it right. Otherwise, I know brackets are a thing. We're going to talk about brackets. I'm going to go through and make a bracket. I haven't actually looked at the bracket yet. I haven't seen a single thing. So it ought to be a lot of fun. Jake,
this is great.
I'm going to trust the model.
Yeah, well, that's what we should be doing.
That's what we should be doing.
Been well for us here.
It has been. Now it's going to get interesting. There's going to be a couple games. I think like the second game we talk about, I looked at the model saying like 50-50. And so it's going to be like, well, now we actually got to think about the stupid thing. We're going to do this show very different than usual. You're going to kind of drive. And I'm going to be kind of in the background.
I have the power.
You have the power. Yeah, you're going to be the one driving. You're going to be the one talking about the game, set up the games, and I'm going to say what the model says. For the first round games, I think it'll be a little bit interesting for some of them. Some of them won't. We're just picking winners, and so like we're not going to spend a lot of time on the 116s and 215 stuff like that. But as we get going later on, it'll be really interesting because as I picked my bracket, I can tell you what the model will project as of now, without considering any sort of recency bias adjustments or whatever. So it'll be pretty close to what the model will say. Now, by the time we get there might be some adjustments, some injuries right now. Right now, I've got the people that are questionable. So Houston's a little bit dinged up with Sasser out, for instance, or questionable, I should say. So that's kind of something to consider with the model. So we'll kind of talk about those caveats, but we'll kind of get to play a little what if, and I'll kind of plug into the model in real time here. In real time, I don't even know what games we're going to get to. I don't even know what I'm going to predict. I don't know what the model's going to predict, but we'll get to go through and say, yeah, if these two teams played today, this is what the model says. So I think it'll be a lot of fun, kind of projecting out. Jake, anything else that the viewer needs to know before we go into this?
No. These aren't my picks. These are all you. I'm going to set it up as evenly as possible and not lead you one way or the other. We'll see how my hosting skills go.
There you go. Hey, and once I come back, you can come back and you can say if you completely disagree with a pick, right? You're the host. You're driving. You are free to do that. All right. Well, before we get to it, though, some reminders. So please hit that like button if you're on YouTube. Also, if you aren't yet, please consider subscribing or following. It's free. If you turn on notifications, it was any of the college basketball, MLB, or college football content this channel provides. I already mentioned the Patreon. I always talk about that, but it got so many great benefits. If you're not over there yet, you got the plays of the day, you got all the model picks, you got the Discord chat. We have a lot of fun over there. Just cannot recommend it enough. Just check it out if you haven't yet, www.patreon.com/pickswiththeprofessor. You can window shop if nothing else. So go check that out for more details. But if you're not there, still thrilled to have you here. Also, join us on Wager Lab. It's a free mobile app where we've got prizes. If you finish in the top 3 of our contest, you get 500 points. It's like 500 fake dollars. And, no money's exchanged. You're just kind of, practice strategies or what you want to do. You got money line picks. You can do spread picks. You can do totals. Free pool, prizes at the top 3 people for Amazon gift cards. So sign up, links in the show description if you're not with us yet. Otherwise, Jake, I'm handing you the keys, and we're gonna start. I'm sure with a banger right off the top, right?
Yes, we're going to go with the South region here, and we're going to start with Alabama and the winner of Texas A&M and Southeast Missouri State because that's worth talking about. Again,
I mean, yeah, I don't even think I'm not going to type this in. I don't know what the model says. It's going to be Alabama by I don't know, 30. I don't know, probably not that many, but it's going to be a lot. These are those games that you want to bet on all the games, but I don't know how you bet on this because we see so many of these early games where the number 1 seeds just dominate. And sometimes these play-in teams, because they're not very good, they're the weaker ones, right? And we've seen these number 1 seeds win these games by 40 points. But we've also seen these number 1 seeds just not care and only win by 15 because it doesn't matter. So I feel like even against the spread, it's impossible here. For the bracket, obviously it's Bama moving on, but from a betting perspective, it's really hard to figure out how to handle these games.
Yeah, with these games, especially this one, this far out, I would look under just because they're going to look at the pace of either of those teams and the pace of Alabama, and I think that total is going to be hung too high, but that's way into the future.
Way into the future, yep.
All right, so the next game we got up is a very interesting one. I'm excited to watch this one. I think it'll be a tight game. We got Maryland and West Virginia. We've got two teams that were middle of the pack of their conferences, like to the upper end. And obviously West Virginia played in a bigger conference, in the better conference, but who knows how Maryland, if they're going to bring their offense or not.
Yeah, this was an interesting one. The model says Maryland 51%. I've got Maryland ranked 27th, West Virginia ranked 29th. So a great matchup for sure. Should be really interesting. I feel for the winner of this game because Bama is just a juggernaut, right? So going up every once in a while, Bama doesn't show up, but otherwise, it's hard to imagine either one of these teams really, giving Bama much trouble other than like the random Oklahoma game, right? The model says 50-50, so this is one where we're truly just going with what we think. West Virginia, I've got them with the better offense, but the worst defense. Mm-hmm. They play a faster style than Maryland for sure, so it's definitely a clash of styles. I'm going to go West Virginia on this one simply because too many times I have thought the Big Ten would do something and they don't. So I'm just going to go with the Big 12 team here. Maryland's obviously one of the stronger Big Ten teams, but the Big Ten has been so up and down. I feel like you got to go with the team that's the proven conference that, tends to perform better based off of the competition they've seen, all season long. So I'll go West Virginia.
Yeah, I'm probably going to agree with this one when I run my bracket out. I like this West Virginia team a lot. They've done well, and I just don't trust Maryland to bring their offense wherever they are playing at.
Yeah.
All right, this next game, this is going to be one that I think it's going to be a trendy upset pick with Charleston. You see everybody out there because Charleston was ranked. I don't know how many people actually watch the Mountain West, but San Diego State is out there. Could be a good team, but could be primed for an upset. Who knows?
Yeah, I mentioned this, I guess, in that last Saturday episode that we really tore it up on conference championship. San Diego State, at some point, I just realized was a team that was like, if you just back this team every game, like just money line, doesn't matter how much they're favored by, like they just were quietly rolling. I've got Charleston as the 57th best team right now. So the model doesn't really like them that much. San Diego State, I've got them at 16th. The model says this should be San Diego State minus 5.2. And that they win this game 68% of the time. I agree. I think it's going to be a trendy upset pick here with Charleston. You talk about the first one being thinking of clash of styles. Nothing compared to this one. I mean, Charleston, I've got them at the 28th fastest team. San Diego State plays really slow, 5th best defense in the country. I like what I've seen from San Diego State. I'm not getting sucked into the upset pick here. I love the San Diego State team. They've been so good as of late. I can't pick against them, against a team like Charleston, who's not bad, but I don't think they do one thing well enough to pull the upset here because their offense, I just don't think is good enough to score on San Diego State, and their defense is, I don't think, good enough to stop a San Diego State offense that's their weakness, but I don't think that Charleston defense is good enough.
Yeah, I agree here. This is like Charleston got ranked early in the year or was hovering right around there, and everybody's been kind of leaning that way, wanting that, and everybody wants to find that 12 because everybody knows there's at least one 12 that wins it. This is a very trendy one, but I think San Diego State's the right call here. I think San Diego State is not getting enough respect.
Yeah, and you got Charleston with 3 losses, which is an incredible season, but San Diego State only has 6 and played in a much tougher conference. So it's like not like they're playing. It's not like it's a 5 seed that's got 10 losses and one of those like, they've lost a lot of games. They might get that sort of thing. San Diego State won a lot of games,
Yeah, they did, and I mean, in a tough conference, even that last championship game was tough with Utah State. They had to really battle it out.
Utah State played really well.
I'm not sure when the last time Charleston really had to battle over and over with a really solid team.
A team that was Hofstra, good, yeah.
But
Hofstra is still nowhere near as good as the San Diego State team.
Yeah. All right, next up we've got Virginia, who might be the slowest team to have like that. The ACC championship game, golly, that was wild. There was no open space, and then Furman, who finally makes it in this year after losing in overtime on a buzzer beater to Chattanooga last year. They've got a couple great guards, and I think it'll be very interesting this 4-13 matchup.
I think I've got 3 teams slower than Virginia. I can tell you North Texas and Charlotte are 2 of them. I'm not sure the third one would be, but they keep getting slower and slower. We nailed that Duke Virginia under in that conference championship game. That was painful. I was like watching paint dry. I've got Furman as only the 71st best team, but Sideline projects Virginia to win by 4.6 on average and says that Furman can pull the upset a little bit more than 1 out of 3 times. I'm going to call the upset here. I'm going to go with Furman. I think that the pace that Virginia plays at makes them just more susceptible to the upset. I'm not sure they lose this game, but I just don't think that, you can trust Virginia to go deep. It doesn't mean they won't. It's just I don't want to put my eggs in that basket because they play so slow that they're just more susceptible to be in a high variance game. And if I'm looking to pick upsets, I want high variance because I want weird things to happen. I've got Furman's offense as a 27th best offense and Virginia's defense is a 22nd best defense. So when I talked about that previous game, I just, thinking about can they do something well enough to pull the upset? I think Furman's offense can go toe to toe with Virginia's defense. And I think that's where they've got a chance to pull this upset. So I'll call the upset here and I'll go Furman over Virginia.
Yeah. I like that pick a lot. I think the two older guards that are very, very good for Furman were even improved going into this year. And I think that really sets up well for a game with Virginia where you just need something crazy to happen because Virginia is not going to let you have that many possessions. Doesn't matter how good your offense is. They're going to take the air out of the ball. So just need a little something crazy to happen. And this is one that very well could.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Next up, we've got Creighton and North Carolina State. This game will be wild because I'm not sure what Creighton's doing anymore because they're very confusing to me. And the same thing with NC State. They show up, they beat Duke into oblivion, they handle a couple other teams in the ACC, and then the same thing happens to them in the ACC tournament where it's like they didn't even show up. So good luck in figuring this one out.
I've got Creighton as a 5-point favorite here, winning this 68% of the time, and I'm going to go with Creighton. I just think the ACC was really weak. I've got the 10th best team versus 34th best team. I'm just not sure that NC State has the defense to hang in this one. Their offense is pretty solid, but Creighton ranks in the top 20 both in offense and defense according to Sideline. There's no weird pace things. I mean, NC State's going to play a little bit faster, but not really throwing them off. And Creighton's been kind of all over the map, but so is NC State. So in a game where I'm not really sure I trust either team, I'm just going to stick with NC State's defense is the difference maker in a bad way, and that it's the only not really good unit. So I think that's enough to make me stick with Creighton here.
Yeah, I'm just going to coin toss that one when I have to pick it up.
Which is not a bad strategy sometimes on these games, right? Just be like, I don't know, anything can happen. It's the tournament. Just flip a coin, right?
Yeah, I had a friend in college that he picked his teams based on how many people he knew that went to that school.
There you go. And I'm guessing if it was 0-0, I guess you had to flip a coin, right?
Yeah, I don't know what he did. I don't know. But now we got, your school in Baylor versus UC Santa Barbara. This one should be fairly easy to pick. There's not really much to break into this one.
Yeah, obviously I'm going to pick Baylor on this one. It's really hard to pick a 1, 2, or a 3 to go down. It doesn't mean that it doesn't happen ever, but it's not something that it's not great strategy for your bracket, really. I think the difference there is if you are in a pool with too many people, then maybe you decide to take a chance, I guess. And that's where maybe you get a little bit riskier. But if you're in a smaller pool, don't get too crazy carried away with some of these. One might happen, but everyone else will lose it too. So you're not really, you're better off just avoiding landmines more so. Model says Baylor by 6.4 in this one, and that they'd win 72% of the time. Santa Barbara is, a team that's got a decent offense, but they really lag behind Baylor on this one. The big question mark for Baylor that we're going to have as they move forward is exactly how healthy is Keontae George and is Langston Love coming back. If George is still hobbled and Love is out, this Baylor team might struggle. But, if they get both those guys healthy again, they're one of the better teams in the country. I mean, they're reasonably a top 10 team, but given the injuries that they have right now, the models dropped them down to 36th. I mean, that's just how important those guys are. So injury is definitely a concern for Baylor. Hopefully they got out early enough in the Big 12 tournament to rest up and be healthy coming in, to make a run. As a fan, I'm hoping for that, but so much going to come down to the injuries.
Yeah, it really does. That Keontae George one is nasty. Now this game, I'm not sure that they can put the total high enough on this one. With Missouri and Utah State, the way these two teams like to play offense and aren't that great on defense, it should be absolutely one of the more entertaining first round matchups of the whole tournament. You've got 7 and 10 seeds. matchups are typically my favorite ones because you've got a really good mid-major against a fairly good major team, but that may have struggled either beginning or end of the year. So I think these are always produced just incredible matchups, and this was probably the top one on the board.
Yeah, you've got two offenses that rank inside the top 25 according to the model. The pace should be not lightning fast, but still very fast. I mean, you should be at over our 70 possessions in this game. Model projects a total of 158 for this one, but it's also got Utah State by 3.6 as they win 62% of the time. I'm all over Utah State in this one. I just think Missouri's defense is garbage, and Utah State's defense is not great, but I think it's better than Missouri's. And in a game with good offenses, I think Utah State can get some stops. I'm not sure Missouri gets any stops. I just don't think they're that good. They've also got some injury concerns, and I think that's the big problem they've got right now. Is a fully healthy Missouri team is much more competitive against Utah State in a better game. But I'm worried about Missouri and exactly how healthy they are. And if they aren't 100% healthy, I really like this Utah State team. And I think the Mountain West might have been as good as the SEC, with the exception of the fact that you had Alabama at the top of the SEC. And, Alabama, Tennessee, you had a couple of those teams right there at the top. But otherwise, the Mountain West, 1 through 5 was just as good as the SEC, whatever 3 through, whatever that Missouri is competing with. So I think Utah State's just about as battle tested as anybody, other than anybody can go out there and get whooped by Alabama, right? That doesn't really help you any. I like this Utah State team against, what I'm not sure is a healthy Missouri team.
No. Yeah, I felt my heart broke for Taylor Funk in that San Diego State championship game. He may or may not have stepped out of bounds on a 3 that cut it to 1. And then the shot clock, however they decided they had enough evidence to overturn that, was beyond me.
No idea.
And just both happened to be on him with key threes. I just felt bad. And here we are to Princeton and Arizona, that I'm not sure Princeton knows what's going to happen to them here. With Arizona is one of the top tier teams out there, and you've got Princeton who plays in the Ivy League.
Yeah, Arizona is the 7th best team in the country. Princeton outside the top 100. This is Arizona by 13.5 according to the model. 88% likely to win. Don't get too crazy. Arizona moves on this one. Princeton's Ivy League teams are fun to watch, but Princeton's just not. Yale was the team coming that could have come from the Ivy early on that we thought might be impressive and do it, but they kind of floundered and struggled and didn't quite, put it all together. But when the Ivy League has a good team, it's fun. It's just I don't think Princeton is good enough to do it. When the Ivy League gets a 13 or 14 seed, watch out. But as a 15, they can't handle Arizona.
No, not this team. All right, we're going to work our way back up. We're going to go right back with Arizona, who you just said is the 7th team, versus Utah State. This should be a very offensive-heavy game. Mm-hmm. It should be a lot of fun to watch.
Model projects 162 if this happens, and says that Arizona would be a 7-point favorite. I'm not going to overthink this one either. Again, I do like Utah State, but Arizona is just really good. 3rd best offense in the country, and a defense that isn't as bad as their rap. They're the 10th fastest team in the country, so they give up a lot of points because of the fact that they play so fast. I do think that Arizona can struggle against maybe a team that is extremely fast or extremely slow to really throw them off their game. And obviously the game planning against Arizona is to play them faster and don't let that defense set up. Utah State's gets their offense. They don't play that lightning speed, though. They hit a lot of threes. And Arizona State could pull the upset because shooting all those threes, that's how you pull a big upset, right? Is you go 16-31 from 3. Yeah. But in general, you play this game enough times, and Arizona's just got way too much talent. There's a reason the model says they win 3 out of 4 times. I'm not going to overthink it. I got the Wildcats going to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, if they go 16-31, those 15 misses that Utah State is going to turn into slam dunks. And with the way Arizona likes to run, and they've just got too much talent. I don't think Utah State's got the defense to get in their way enough here. Next up, though, this would be a very entertaining game and a very question mark game. We got Baylor and Creighton. If Baylor's healthy, that makes a big difference. Does Creighton show up and play like they have, where they got up to number 5 or number 6 in the nation, or whatever it was, inside the top 10? Like, this could be a very entertaining, a very wild game, and with a lot of points if these teams get going.
And this is where the fact that we just don't know about the injuries, it's going to come up with Baylor, it's going to come up with Houston, it's going to come up with UCLA. When you got such a key guy that's questionable, By the time we get to this game, if it is Baylor, Creighton, or Baylor, whoever would be, if assuming they win, the model could have vastly different projection based off of updating the injury report. So as of right now, this is Monday night. I'm nervous as a Baylor fan. I'm going to pick Creighton in this one. If given the injury situation for Baylor, the model would make this Creighton -5 since Creighton wins 2 out of 3 times. Creighton's been inconsistent, but so is Baylor. As a Baylor fan, I love that stretch there. I'm just afraid that they peaked too early and they got injured. And I hope they put it together. I'll be rooting for them to put it together. I'll be rooting for this pick to be wrong, especially because a Baylor-Arizona matchup would be a lot of fun. But I'm just nervous that there's just too many injuries and too much banged up, and Baylor's just not picking at the right time. So I think that I'm picking against them here and just hoping to be wrong. That way, I'm either right in the bracket or at least I'm excited that my team made the Sweet 16.
I mean, this is one we'll know a lot more after the first round game. I'm not sure if that's Thursday or Friday with these teams, but that will help us out tremendously with Baylor's injuries. Yeah. Next up, we've got Furman and San Diego State. Are you going to go Furman here and double up and get them to the Sweet 16? Or are you going to go stick with your Mountain West love?
I'm sticking with Mountain West. I just love the San Diego State team. I got to pick them to win. The model says that this would be San Diego State -6 and that they win this 70% of the time. Furman's offense is really good, like we talked about, but they're going up against a Virginia defense in the first round that I think they can hang with. There aren't many offenses, I think, that can really do a number on San Diego State. As good as Furman offense is, I don't think this is one of them. Obviously, I think the next round for San Diego State, that would be a different story. But I think San Diego State's defense carries them through here. And their offense, again, San Diego State's weakness is their offense, but Furman's not going to challenge them defensively. So I think San Diego State can get the job done here.
Yeah, I agree with this. Furman, I think it's one and done for them. We've got Alabama, West Virginia coming up. This will be an incredibly entertaining game.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, who doesn't love a good Huggy Bear story in the tournament? Unfortunately, there's no way I can pick against Alabama. Most of the time, the 1 seeds make it to the Sweet 16. That's just your common knowledge there. Don't overthink this one either. Bama would be a 9-point favorite in this game. Whether it's West Virginia or Maryland, would probably be about 9, given the fact that West Virginia and Maryland profile to be so similar to each other. I've got Alabama winning this 82% of the time. This is be one where I don't know what the money line price will be, but I would expect to see us making a money line play on Alabama here, because I think that there's going to be a lot of love on upsets and we want to be on the right ones, but I think people are going to try to get too cute with this. And even though Bama is going to be a steep price, I think there's probably going to be value on the money line. There was value on them on the money line the entire SEC tournament, and I don't see why this would be any different, given that they've got, according to the model, with Houston's injuries and UCLA's injury, now the best defense in the country and the #1 overall team as of right now.
So next up, we've got Alabama and San Diego State. I think I know which way you're going, but I'm scared to go ahead and click San Diego State because I want to give you a chance to hate on the Mountain West here for a second.
Is it bearing the lead if I'm just like, look, I feel like I'm going to have Alabama winning this thing. Like, I just don't see who stops them. Like, is this too early in the show to say that? I mean, the model would say Bama -6.1 here, wins this about 7 out of 10 times. I do love San Diego State, but this would be Bama in the way they play offensively can give them challenges. And we talk about San Diego State's weakness going up against a defense like Alabama. I mean, if this game plays out slow, Alabama's not going to allow 60 points. If this game plays fast, Alabama's going to be one of the few teams in the country that's going to put up 80 on San Diego State. Like, I just don't see a way that San Diego State is a balanced enough team to beat Alabama in this one.
Yeah, it's a tough one. That's a bad draw. Do you think that they would have preferred to lose the Utah State in that championship and get the 6th seed rather than the 5 seed, so they get to the Elite 8 with it with a chance on the Final Four? Or
yeah, I mean, I always would rather be the 3 or the 6 and the 4 or the 5, because I always feel like those, the 2s or the 3s or whatever, are good teams that have flaws. And a lot of times the #1 seeds are tougher, or they'd prefer to be in a #1 with a #1 that wasn't Alabama, right? I mean, imagine San Diego State, Houston, like that would be a really interesting matchup. And a lot of people, if you like defense, right, and you like slower pace, that would probably be a much more, easier challenge, especially if Houston's banged up. We don't know by that point, maybe Sasser's back, but yeah, I think at minimum you just don't want to draw Alabama, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's really it is. So with Creighton and Arizona, who's going to get the pleasure of meeting Alabama in the Elite Eight, like I know which way I'm leaning just because I want to watch it. But which way are you going to go here? Are you going to go with the 1-2, or are you going to go with 1-6?
The model loves Creighton, obviously having them as a 10th best team. Says that Arizona would only win this 51% of the time. So according to the model, this is a true toss-up game. I really would be surprised if this is Arizona -1 or minus, on the money line, -115 or -120, which is what this would be implied. I'd be really shocked. I have to imagine Arizona, if this game happens, is more like a 3-point favorite. And that seems about right. I have to think that Arizona is more likely to win. It's definitely an interesting matchup here because, the best unit of the court's Arizona's offense, but the worst unit's their defense. Creighton's been a more balanced team. Coin toss game, according to the model, I still think Arizona's the better team. That's the one I got to go with here.
Ooh. That's the way. That's the matchup I want to see is the Alabama Arizona. Creighton has surprised me with how good their defense is this year. They're typically not a defensive coach team. Normally, it's pace and space and try to outscore somebody more like the Iowa kind of teams than they are like this team. But I agree. I think Arizona's too much. And this next game to go to the Final Four, I don't know that anybody is going to slow down anybody in this game. I think this is just a pure offensive exposition with Alabama and Arizona.
Yeah, model would make this total 161, and I just talking about the totals that are this high because you don't typically see a lot of totals in the 160s in the tournament. You typically in neutral site games. Some of these stadiums get a little bit funky once you get past the first round, but yeah, this would be a lot of pace. You have the 5th fastest team in the country in Alabama and the 10th fastest in Arizona, so this would be a treat to watch if we could get it. But yeah, I'm taking Alabama in this one. The model would have them favored by 4 points as they win almost 2 out of 3 times. Like I said, I don't think anybody's going to beat this Alabama team. I think, Oklahoma's not the tournament, so who are they going to lose to, right?
All this talk about underdogs and value, and we end up with the first Final Four team as a 1 seed.
I'm going to try to not do that for all the regions. But again, I haven't actually looked at the bracket, so I don't know if I will or not. I don't even know who the 1 seeds are. Houston's probably a 1 seed, right?
Yep. So here we're going to move on to the East region. We've got Purdue as the 1 seed here. They're going against Texas, the winner of Texas Southern and Fairleigh Dickinson. Don't know that we really need to go into this.
Move on.
We just go to Purdue. But this is very interesting. I was very surprised that FAU got a 9 seed. I think they're a little upset they got a 9 seed because now they get to go off and play Purdue, or a 1 seed. But and Memphis kind of surprised me that they were up this high too. So I think this is a very interesting matchup and it could be a lot of fun. And I really hope Florida Atlantic brings out their Miami Vice uniforms.
Yeah, those are great. I agree. The model agrees with you. I've got Florida Atlantic as the 17th best team in the country, and Memphis is the 18th best team in the country, which means that both of these teams should be more like 4 or 5 seeds, not 8 and 9. This is a really, I haven't seen the bracket, so I'm reacting in real time. I'm just shocked at this. Should be a fantastic game. Model has it about a pick 'em really 50-50. Says that Florida Atlantic, again, being 1 spot higher, be slightly favored. But you've got 2 really solid teams as well that are playing really well right now. All 4 units, offensively and defensively, are in the top 40. Memphis plays a little bit faster than average. Florida Atlantic plays a little bit faster than average, but Memphis has been playing really fast. It obviously got to Houston there in that last game. I really like both of these teams and like the way they're playing. This feels like another classic situation where it's an 8-9 game where I'm like, I want both teams to win. I wouldn't be surprised if either one of these teams gave Purdue all they want. We've seen Purdue this year constantly flirt with disaster. Whether it was like in that Big Ten championship game or even the one before that where they, didn't start playing, until the second half. We've seen them constantly choke up big leads. Both of these teams are talented enough to give them a scare. It really reminds me of last year when TCU, I believe it was, gave Gonzaga a scare. Mm-hmm. Memphis gave somebody a scare. A bunch of those 8-9s really gave scares to ones. And this is the same thing because these are 2 teams that are much better caliber than that. All that to say, I'm just talking because I don't want to make a pick on this game because this being such a coin toss game, this is the one where it probably doesn't matter. Purdue probably wins the next game, but I'm going to go Memphis. The fact that they beat Houston there at that last game is just, it really says a lot. And Sasser obviously not playing, but the way they dominated that game, just hats off to them, the way they've been playing at the end of the season. And I like Florida Atlantic. We had a bunch of A-grade plays in the conference tournament on Florida Atlantic, but the model, knows they're good. And I'm not sure the model is caught up to just how good Memphis is. So I think there might actually be a little bit of value in Memphis here. And they might actually should be favored rather than the coin toss the model says.
Yeah, this is one where I disagree. I think Memphis had a little bit of a chip on their shoulder after losing to Houston the game before, like the last game of the regular season on a buzzer beater. That they just came out extra motivated and caught a Houston team that was reeling from an injury. I think Florida Atlantic gets them here, but this is your bracket, not mine.
Hey, either way, it should be a great contest. This is definitely one I'm looking forward to.
Yes. Oh, it's one of my favorite games. This is where we start to get into my problems with what the committee did. Like, I don't think it is right. I don't think the 3, 4, and 5 were done right here. I think Duke should have been the 3, Kansas State 4, Tennessee 5. I don't think they seeded these teams right. I think they've done a poor job with those 3 because Duke is playing much better than any of these teams, and they obviously didn't care about metrics, but whatever. That's just my thing. They also gave Duke a absolutely terrifying matchup in Oral Roberts. This is another 12 seed that'll be a trendy pick. Like everybody knows, or you're going to hear a bunch of it when Max Asmus went nuts. I think when the tournament was here in Indy, when the whole thing was here in Indy, and carried Oral Roberts to a couple wins, and then they've got a 7-4 guy that didn't need the ladder to cut down his own net for their championship. But Duke is also playing great. They've got at full strength. They've only lost once. I don't think they were like 10 or 12-1 at full strength. So this will be a very tough game.
Yeah, I agree. This is another one that I'm would agree with you in questioning the seeding. About Oral Roberts is the 28th best team. That's more like a 7 seed. I think they're really good. But Duke's, like you said, been playing really well. The model's got them up to 12th in the country, and we've talked a lot about Duke, right? The fact that they finally got healthy, finally playing with each other, and the model's picking up on that. And we talked about the team-based metrics will be a little bit more down on Duke. And I guess it's the contrast between my problem, my rebuttal, I guess, or addition to what you would say there. My problem with the committee is it feels like the same thing that happens with the college football playoff, which is they do whatever they want to do, and then they make up whatever explanation they want, and it's not always consistent. And I don't mind kind of going one way or the other, just kind of stay consistent. You can't say that, well, we're really considering the fact that Avery Anderson isn't around for Oklahoma State. That's why they didn't make it. You can't say that the injury affects their seed unless you then also, if you do that with Duke, you have to give them a much higher seed than this, right? Or if you do this to Duke and say, well, we're looking at the entire body of work and they didn't play well for part of the season because of those injuries, then you have to consider, Oklahoma State in the whole body of work as well, and not just look at how they played without one of their better players, right? So it's kind of that. That's my issues. I don't like that inconsistency there.
Yeah, and I think they've really discounted teams for injuries and didn't count it for them, like for the success without them. And
that seems weird not to do both.
Yeah. But
yeah, model would have Duke by 3.7 in this as they win 63% of the time. Obviously, Duke's going to play this really slow, and Oral Roberts wants to play it really fast. All 4 of these units are pretty good. The only one that's not up to snuff really is Oral Roberts' defense, which isn't bad, and it's better than their defense a couple of years ago. I think they just got a really tough draw. I'm going with Duke here. The way they're playing right now is fantastic, and the way they went through that ACC tournament, not that the ACC is good, but it's still better. It's still as good as this Oral Roberts team. I think the biggest issue here that Oral Roberts is going to have is they're going to want to play really fast and mess up a team. And Duke is so talented at slowing them down. I think they're one of the few teams in the country, the Dukes and the Houstons and the San Diego States. There's only a handful of teams, I think, that are going to really frustrate Oral Roberts and take them out of their game. And Duke, the way they've been playing, the way they've been slowing teams down, they're one of those teams. And so I think it's a terrible matchup for Oral Roberts. I feel like, as much as I want them to win, and they're a fun underdog story, I don't want to be in front of this Duke train the way they're playing right now.
No, I agree here. Like, I think one of the biggest advantages other than Asmus is the 7'4" guy, but Duke's got enough height and mobile height that pulls him away from the bucket, and I think he's going to just not make him next to worthless, because he's going to be just as much of a liability, and I think that's going to hurt him because teams that like Oral Roberts level just not deep enough, and
yeah,
there's
a lot of teams that Oral Roberts could upset, and it's just just a terrible draw for them to play this Duke team. Whoever plays Duke early on has got a terrible draw with the way this team's playing.
Yeah, my heart kind of breaks for them because I was hoping to see them in the Sweet 16 somewhere.
Yeah.
But all right, now we're going to go to Tennessee and Louisiana, and Tennessee is very injured, very inconsistent offensively, but very good defensively. Louisiana seems to be kind of a trendy upset pick right now because of those reasons with Tennessee. Is Ziegler worth enough to you offensively to get Tennessee beat by a 13 seed?
No.
No.
No, full stop. No, I'd have Tennessee by 11.5 in this one. This winning 86% of the time. Tennessee without Ziegler's offense drops to the 50th best team in the country offensively, which is, when you consider the fact that they are now being, 50th best isn't bad compared to 360, but after one game, we're going to be down to 32 teams. After everybody's, so being 50th and there's 32 teams left, not great, right? So that's where Tennessee's offense is going to have a problem, is that they're going to be one of the weaker offenses of the teams that's remaining after the first game, but they've also got the third best defense still in the country. And in Louisiana, I've got them ranked 100th overall. Their offense is their better unit, and it's going to really struggle against this Tennessee defense. And Louisiana's defense is very mediocre, and Tennessee's offense gets a bad rap because they are so good, and so we hold them to a higher standard. But this offense, if that offense played in they would be one of the better offenses in the conference, and they'd put up as many points as they wanted on a defense as bad as Louisiana. So I don't quite understand why this is a trendy upset pick. This is just Louisiana is just not that good, right? They're nowhere near. Put Oral Roberts here, maybe that gets wild and interesting, but Louisiana is nowhere near the caliber of a team like Oral Roberts.
Yeah, I agree, and this is why I'm debating on catching a flight to Orlando to catch this game right here. I think this is how it's going to run, because Louisiana hasn't seen a defense like Tennessee's yet. I don't know that Tennessee covers. I wouldn't be betting on them to cover whatever the line is, just because that offense can go cold. But I don't think Louisiana is going to be able to score enough points to win that game.
Yeah, this is one where if things go right for Tennessee, they might win by 20. If things go wrong, they probably still win by 5.
Yeah. Yep, I totally agree. So we're going to stay in the SEC here. We're going to get Kentucky, who seems to be playing a lot better right now, versus Providence, who can't seem to find it again. They were really good there for a stretch, then gets drilled by Seton Hall and hasn't really shown up well since then in the Big Ten tournament. Based on talent, and then Kentucky's also very injured. They may have half a point guard on the roster at this time. And who knows if Frederick is going to be full go. This is a tough matchup to me for either team. I'm not sure exactly who I'd think wins.
Model says 51% to Kentucky right now. That's given the injury report we have today, which is, like you said, a bunch of guys questionable for Kentucky. I'm going to go with the Wildcats here on this one. I think if they end up a little healthier than we think, then they have a big edge. Even if they don't, I just don't like what I've seen from this Providence team. They just look completely lost. We see teams peak early. We see teams catch fire, that sort of thing. We have to be careful not to overreact to that. But one team's just playing a lot better than the other one right now. Kentucky's been pretty decent, and Providence just hasn't been. So I think that's the way I got to go with this one.
Yeah, I'd probably lean that way, but man, I'd say coin toss game to me that I'm not exactly sure who I'd pick.
And another one where you can wait until closer to, you don't have to until the brackets lock right on Thursday morning to maybe find out a little bit more on the injury front.
Yeah, it's very smart. Kansas State versus Montana State. I think this is a very interesting game. With some of the crazy stuff that's happening around Kansas State right now, and with Montana State really getting a real big break for Eastern Washington, losing a game or two before they had to see them. Got a little easier walk into this into the big dance here. I think they were seeded correctly. I like a 14 seed for them. I think they're dangerous there.
Yeah, I'm just sad we didn't get to that Montana State Eastern Washington rematch, because that was setting up to be a really good one. I'm going to go Kansas State on this one. I like Montana State, but the model still ranks them 87th, and so kind of like you said, they're not seeded too poorly in this one. Like they're reasonably good. They're good for their conference, but they're still a notch below almost all of these teams that are good in the tournament. And Kansas State, kind of up and down, but I think the model's disrespecting a little bit, only having 41st best. Model says K-State -4. Personally, I'd make the line more like 5.5. Model says they win about 2 out of 3 times. I might think a little bit more than that. Kansas State just, their best unit on the court to be Kansas State's defense. The worst unit on the court is going to be Montana State's offense. They're going to really struggle scoring, and Montana State might hold Kansas State down a little bit. Not expecting too many points in this one, but I think Kansas State can get close to at least 70, and I'm not sure Montana State scores 60 in this game.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do want to point out right now, we are chalk, absolute pure chalk in this. So now here we go to the 7-10, and with Michigan State and USC, there's some stats out there that are like the Big Ten is like 12-1 in this matchup at 7-10 because I don't know whatever reason. That doesn't matter if they're the 7 seed or 10 seed.
Hmm.
I think you could pull out whatever stat you want out of this tournament. There's something there, but I don't know which way I would go here. These are two teams that I really just don't care about.
Who's the 7 seed in this one? Is it Michigan State?
Michigan State, yep.
Yeah, I've got them as the better team, so that makes sense. I have them favored by 1.7 in this. They won 54% of the time. Pretty close to a coin toss here. I'll go USC. I'll take the 10 seed in this one. I'm not buying into a trend like that. I don't think it really is predictive necessarily. I think it's kind of small sample size weirdness. USC's offense worries me, but Michigan State's offense worries me too. At least Michigan State has the excuse of playing slow, but these are two decent teams. Neither one's great, but who knows? I'll just go with a 10, just so you can't say I did an entirely chalk bracket.
I like that. Also,
Region, I should say region.
Yep. Andy Enfield, great coach, Florida Gulf Coast. He's 10-2 in the NCAA tournament. I don't see a reason he's not getting to 11 here. All right, so now we got Marquette and Vermont, who I think Marquette should have been a 1 seed with the way they played, how they finished, whatever. Jake griping about seeding is normal. I don't know if you think Vermont has a chance in this one or not.
I mean, Vermont is a lot of fun, and I think they're better than a 15. I think they're better than a couple of the 14s, probably just based off what I've seen. We'll come 66th, but they're not going to beat Marquette. The model says Marquette wins this 7 out of 9 times. Maybe 8 out of 9. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they played this 9 times. I'm not sure Vermont would win twice, maybe once. Vermont to win this game, though they are at least. They at least have the formula for it, right? Which is playing really slow, limiting possessions, high variance game, good offense, can shoot the 3 ball. And so, I mean, they have the recipe for the upset to happen. Yeah. It's just this Marquette team is really good. And I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I think what I've seen from this Marquette team is like an ability to win a slow game, the ability to win a fast game. They just seem pretty versatile, which at least makes them a little bit more resistant to the upset than maybe a more one-dimensional team. But this Marquette team doesn't really seem to have a lot of weaknesses, in my opinion. Their weakness, obviously, would be their defense, but they also force so many turnovers that kind of masks that weakness and makes it not that bad,
Yeah, I mean, that's true of all Shaka Sark teams. He's willing to be aggressive and give you a layup for the 2 turnovers he gets before that. But I just love this Marquette team. I think there is a tremendous amount of value on them right now at plus like 3,500 or 4,000 to win it all. I think that is a decent pick if you want to throw a flyer on somebody to win it all.
I might play it a little bit more conservative and pick them to win the region, kind of see what your odds are. They're shop around though, people on this. The odds vary wildly per book, and some of them have a ton of juice in them. But Marquette to win the region, I think might be pretty smart, especially because Purdue could absolutely win it all, but Purdue could easily lose in the first weekend. You just never know what you're going to get from them, and that could open up the draw for Marquette to be a little bit more favorable for them.
Yeah, this is very true because also Purdue beat Marquette by 5 in Marquette, so a lot of fun stuff there. But
yeah, absolutely.
Here we are going against Pac-12 versus Big East. We got USC versus Marquette. I mean, there's not much more to add. We just talked about these 2 teams. I think. Yeah,
the model would have Marquette -5 in this as they win 63% of the time. I'd go with Marquette on this one. The ones in the 2s for the most part, don't overthink them. For the it's going to be tougher for them to lose in the first round. First weekend. They tend to make it to the second weekend. USC's played a couple of really good games this year. You're kind of just trying to catch lightning in a bottle to assume that they could beat a team like Marquette. It's not impossible. And obviously, if a team like Vermont, pulls the upset, then USC would be a great one to make to the second weekend. But that doesn't seem likely. I think let's just not overthink it. Go with Marquette.
Yeah, no, to take out a number 2 seed in the second round, you've got to have a more style clash than what you're getting here. I don't think it's going to quite work. Yeah. So now we've got Kansas State versus Kentucky. 2 very similar teams.
Some Wildcat on Wildcat crime.
Yeah. I mean, a Wildcat will win. We have now guaranteed a Wildcat into the Sweet 16.
There you go.
But I think these 2 teams match up very well. They're very similar and play the same style of basketball. So this should be a very interesting matchup if we get it.
Yeah, and the model says this would be about a coin toss right here as well. I'm going to go with Kansas State. I got to go with the Big 12 teams, and I picked Baylor to lose, so it's not even being a homer as much as just being. I think it was the best conference in basketball, and I think that gives them a leg up. And I think we're going to see a lot of Big 12 teams in the second round, and in the second weekend, and it may not be this one, but I think there should be a lot of them there. I like this Kansas State team. I love their coach, and I think they got a really good chance to make it to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, that's that is a game that I have no clue who's going to win, just because that is.
Yeah, model says 50-50. I would agree. It's like anything can happen in that game. So that's why I'm going with a better conference. But yeah, nothing would shock me if they played. That would be definitely must-see TV right there.
Yes. And so now we're going to go to Duke and Tennessee, the game that's going to make me pull my hair out because I don't know what to do, especially if I'm in Orlando. I don't know what I'll be wearing. I can't really get into this game because I don't know what I think about it yet.
Take the under, whatever the under is. I would say that 115, don't care, go under. Model projects 124 for this one, but I mean, there's going to be no pace in this game whatsoever. The best units on the court are the defenses, but Duke's offense has been playing so well. I model would give Tennessee the slight edge here, make them a 1.5 point favorite versus they win 54% of the time. I'm going to take Duke in this one though. They just the way they've been playing. The other thing you have to think about with brackets, right, is who can make a run and who can't make a run. And this Tennessee team, I mean, they can, right? But of all the really good teams in the tournament, Tennessee, Jake, as you know, is one that is going to be really susceptible to an upset because if their offense doesn't show up, they can really lose to just about anybody, it seems like.
Yeah, I was almost expecting them to get a 5 seed and grab Oral Roberts or Charleston and be ready to pick against them because – it's bad offensively right now. Duke, Tennessee, I would go Duke. I think the size of Duke throws a lot of issues at Tennessee because their size is mobile. You throw Lively and Filipowski out there as 2 7-footers. The 7-footers that Tennessee have, they don't have 2 that mobile. This is going to be if this matchup happens, we're going to get a very similar game to that Duke Virginia game where there's just no open space on that floor for anybody to score. Under is the right play.
Yep.
Purdue and Memphis going to be very, very interesting. Complete clash of styles, complete clash of everything, really. Very guard-oriented, jump shot to very post-oriented, and very slow. Defense is going to be a high value here. Whoever can play the better defense probably wins this game. But which way are you leaning?
Yeah, the model would have Purdue by 5 about on this one since they went 2 out of 3 times. I'm going to pick Purdue here just because 1 seeds almost always make it through. But this is definitely a game that I think is going to be really tight. I think that Edey is the difference here in that Memphis, to me, profiles very or if it's Florida Atlantic, because again, I think that's a straight up coin toss game. Memphis and Florida Atlantic profile very similar to if you put them in the Big Ten, I don't think you would have noticed much of a difference other than the fact that Memphis plays fast and most of the Big Ten teams don't, right? But otherwise, I mean, they're not drastically different than say the Ohio State team we saw at the start of the season that we thought was going to be good, or the Rutgers team that looked really good, or Illinois when they've looked good. I mean, Memphis and Florida Atlantic are not drastically different than a lot of these teams in the Big Ten. And Purdue won most of those games. And they won most of them tight. And I think that's what we would see here, that late they can get buckets from Edey because he's just that reliable. And it's going to take a better team to knock off Purdue. But I do think this is one where if Purdue is like a 5.5, 6 point favorite, I feel like it plays out just like all the other Purdue games this season, which was if you laid a big number, they probably won and didn't cover. I just don't see it being – I see them getting scared here for sure, like we've seen in recent years with some of these 1-8, 9 type games.
Yeah, look, the biggest part about Edey is he hits free throws. So there's no way to really take him out of the game. He's too big, too strong to move him out of the lane. You can't foul him and hope he misses the free throws. He's 70+%. That makes it really hard to stop. I mean, with that being said, if you can get the game going fast enough that he can't set up, that's your way to beat him. Memphis has the tools to do it. FAU has the tools to do it. But that is everything going perfectly right to pull that upset.
Yeah, they're just – I feel like they're like a lot of the Big Ten, just good enough to really make it close. But in the end, Edey's such a weapon that it's still hard to beat them. But yeah, I think either one of those teams really could give Purdue a scare, and it should be a more entertaining a lot of times the one seeds on Saturday or Sunday you end up with, they end up winning by 10 or 12 and they're not interesting. I think that one would be a really interesting contest no matter which team they get.
Yep. And then here's our first rematch of a game that's already happened this year. Purdue handled Duke early in the year. Duke wasn't at full strength. Jeremy Roach got hurt for part of the game. Don't know if he was playing at full strength when he came back. Purdue was shooting a lot better than what they did, but at the same time, Duke couldn't figure out what to do with Edey. Duke had no offense because the defense was very good from Purdue and has stayed at that level. So this is a very, very interesting game. Probably one of the best we'll get out of the Elite Eight.
Yeah, I'm going to take Duke on this one. Model says that Purdue would win this 58% of the time, but I just think that this is where a team that's in Purdue that just can't quite put their opposition away, that Duke is good enough to get by. You have a Duke team that's going to play slow against a Purdue team that's going to play slow. That creates a little bit more variance. That's not really what Purdue would want in a perfect world. They can't play that much faster because everything running through Edey. But in a perfect world, they'd rather play faster, get more possessions, and show that they're the better team. But the fewer possession game, I think, lends itself to more likely to be upset. This Duke team's playing so well. I think they can beat Purdue. I know Duke's a trendy pick to go deep here just based off of the way they played in that ACC tournament. But I mean, the way they played in that ACC tournament explains why they're a trendy pick, right? I think that they've got a really good chance to make it deep in this tournament. And I just don't trust Purdue to take care of business consistently. So I don't want to take them too deep because they could easily have lost the round before this game.
Yeah. I mean, trendy picks aren't always wrong. Sometimes they're trends for reason, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes people see something.
Yep.
This next one, man, I said Purdue Duke might be the best game, but this could give a run for the money. I think this East region is by far the best region. I think you're going to get the best matchups here. You got Kansas State, Marquette. Should be an intense game. Should be a very fun one to watch.
Yeah, I'll go Marquette on this one. I've got Marquette inside the top 10. Kansas State, though, I've got it 41st. So, I mean, this is just a kind of a mismatch here. I think Kansas State has a better chance against a team like Kentucky, who has been playing well, but Kentucky just isn't at the same caliber of this Marquette team. I think Marquette's really good. Sideline says they win. Marquette wins this 7 out of 10 times. They should be favored by almost 6 points. So I'm not going to overthink this one and say that the biggest difference here is that Kansas State scores points sometimes when they play faster, but their offense just really lags in comparison to how good this Marquette offense is. That's the biggest difference here, is that Marquette's just got a much better offense. I've got it inside the top 10.
All right. So now we're down to Marquette and Duke. Does the speed of Marquette kill Duke, or does Duke's size and strength push out Marquette?
This one would be a great game. And like you said, like definitely a kind of a contrast style, right? Marquette's not the fastest team in the world, but they do things that kind of speed you up and going for the turnover, and it's just a different style. This would be a great clash. I would love to see this. The model would have Marquette favored by 0.6 of a point, as they win 51% of the time. So you're squarely into coin toss territory here. I feel like you could go either way on this game, because you can really make a case that Marquette and what they do weird with the turnovers, with the pressure, with the Shaka Smart, the way he's, kind of gotten back to more of what he did at VCU with Marquette, kind of went away with that a little bit in Texas based off of who he had and how he was trying to run his ship there, but kind of getting back to some of his, his glory days there. And that could give Duke a little bit of trouble. But, Duke could really, if Duke's got the guard play to really prevent the ball from being turned over, that's going to make Marquette struggle a little bit, because they're not going to get what's going for them. I kind of lean towards the latter. So I'm going to go Duke here and just say, I think they've got good enough, talented enough players to not turn the ball over that much. And that's going to be where this game, I think, is won or lost. If you agree with that statement or not, I think that tells you how you feel about this game.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The turnovers are the difference in this game. It's kind of wild to see Duke with the inexperienced coach and Marquette with the experienced one.
Right.
What I think he's got one Final Four underneath his belt with Shaka and several tournaments. And I mean, Shire's been on the bench, but I don't know.
A little bit different when they're looking at you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When you've got to answer the questions later. All right. Yep. So we're going to move down here to the Midwest region. We're going to start with the whole Houston and Northern Kentucky. Northern Kentucky wasn't even supposed to win their conference tournament. We've got Houston here, who is injured and beat up. I think this is a perfect buy for them, but I'll let you make the pick.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't even need to really talk about this one. I mean, like you said, it's a perfect buy for them. Northern Kentucky's been a fun team at times to pick, but in a conference that was very subpar. I've got them ranked 144th. So model says Houston wins this 9 out of 10 times. That seems low, to be honest. I don't think Houston wins 10 out of 10, and that I don't think it extends to 100 out of 100. But I mean, how many? If they play this game 100 times, how many does Northern Kentucky win? Like 4? I mean, it can't be many, right?
Maybe. Yeah, it's got to be a perfect storm of everything for Northern Kentucky to pull this off.
Yeah,
But
it's definitely up in the 90s for sure for Houston, 90% for Houston.
In a giant clash of styles, we've got Iowa, who doesn't believe in defense, and we've got Auburn, who thinks defense is the only side of the floor at times. It should be a very outstanding game. We've got two really fun animated coaches at times with the way Fred McCaffrey likes to stare down refs, and then Bruce Pearl sweats through suits. This could be a very fun one and very tight.
Yeah. Total in this one, projected total from the model is 150. So expects a lot of points there, even though the pace shouldn't be overly fast. But, Auburn, plays about average. And of course, Iowa plays pretty fast. Iowa, number 4th in the country in defense. Auburn, 7th. I'm going to go Auburn. I think, I really would have loved to have seen crisscrossed with some of these other 8-9s because I think, the Florida Atlantic Memphis, I'd pick both of them over either one of these teams. The model loves Auburn. I don't know if I see it, but in a game where I don't really trust Auburn, I'll just trust the model. And the model loves Auburn. So let's go with them.
No. Smart way to do it. Now, here's one I've seen show up as a giant killer in Drake. And Drake is a very good team. They beat Auburn at Auburn. They've had very good, but Miami has got some really good guards and has been able to really put it on some teams. This is a 5-12 matchup that I feel sorry for Miami because this shouldn't have been a 12 seed to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about injuries. The big question with Miami, of course, we had them picked in plus odds against Duke, and they got one of their best player, goes down in the first minute, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge question. I've got him at 50-50 in the model, and that really hurts Miami. Drops their offense outside the top 10. They really rely on the offense, drops their defense into the triple digits, and actually says that Drake's the better team with him being 50-50. This is a game that I think you maybe wait until Thursday morning, or at least until you know more about his status, because that's such a key thing. Miami has the guard play, and people always talk about how, that's such a, recipe for success in the tournament. I just, to me, it's all about the health of Miami at this point. I'm going to go Drake. I think that they can pull it off here. And it's unfortunate for Miami because, like you said, because Drake should not be a 12 seed, and it's unfortunate Miami, they're not fully healthy, but that's really a bad 1-2 punch. And to me, it makes for a perfect recipe for an upset.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about it in that Duke Miami game where I was saying like Norchad Omier is the guy that changes that game for Miami, and he went down in a minute, and then Duke took off.
Miami just couldn't hang at that point. They just kind of were constantly down like 6 points the whole game. They could not get over the hump.
Now, I was at a restaurant that when this whole bracket was coming out, and people here in Indiana were loving the fact that they drew Kent State. I'm not so sure they should be loving it. This is a very scary matchup to me. Kent State played to Houston to a 1-point game, but Indiana has been playing a lot better at the tail end of the season. They finally quit questioning if Xavier Johnson was going to come back. Hood Schifino is a difference maker. When he pulls up to that 15-foot area, he never seems to miss. Trace Jackson Davis is a stud. You don't have to talk about it. But, man, Kent State can be tough.
They can. The model's just not that high on Kent State. I've got Indiana by 3.5 here, winning 62% of the time. It's not the craziest upset pick if you want to pick Kent State. I think that Kent State's defense, though, just hasn't been as good as it was kind of advertised, or as well as it played early on. It held Gonzaga down. Of course, that was at a time when Gonzaga, wasn't playing their best, not like they are now. Gonzaga's playing a whole lot better now. Than they were then. They played Houston well. Houston's its own enigma, right? With every advanced metric system that in the world, I think has Houston number 1 when fully healthy, but nobody else seems to agree with that. So I don't know what to make of some of that. They just didn't play as well in the conference as they should have. And I can't ignore that. The model's not ignoring that. If they had breezed through the conference and maybe not looked as impressive as they should have, but they were still winning, it'd be one thing. But losing 6 games in that conference, I don't know if that's good enough to pull the upset here. And I just don't think their defense is good enough to slow down what's been a pretty good Indiana offense. Kent State's offense obviously isn't as good either. I'm going to stick with Indiana on this one and not pick the upset, just because I think I'd rather actually Kent State's offense be a little bit worse, but make their defense better, makes it more likely they can pull the upset, because they'd have a really good chance of frustrating Indiana, but they're not really going to do anything to throw them off their pace. And I've got Indiana's offense ranked better than Kent State's defense. And if Indiana wins that battle, they're definitely going to win the battle when Kent State has the ball, and that's going to make it tough to pull the upset.
Yeah. My fear with Indiana was what happened to him in the Penn State game. It's like they forgot Trace Jackson Davis was on that team. Both threes they made during the game came off when Penn State doubled him. They didn't make another 3 outside of that. That scares me that they could do that with a guy as good as Trace Jackson Davis.
It's like we always talk about. We always assume coaches do the smart thing, but they don't always. And or not the coaches.
I don't think it was the
players. Yeah, it's the players, right? You never know if the players are doing the smart thing too, right? It's we always assume that, but it doesn't always happen.
Yeah, I mean, then we've got Iowa State versus the winner of Mississippi State and Pittsburgh. Now, this can go one of two ways. You get Mississippi State, you've got a defensive battle that maybe 5 points get scored, and if Pittsburgh wins, then you've got them trying to repeat exactly what they did to Mississippi State. Which way are you going?
Jake, I'm gonna flip the tables on you here. If Mississippi State wins, what does the model project the total to be for Iowa State, Mississippi State? What is your guess?
118.
113. I mean, that's just incredible. And that would be about pretty much a top 10 defensive matchup, two teams outside the top 100 offensively, and 2 teams that have really no desire to push the pace. They're not quite as slow as the Charlottes and North Texas and Virginia's, but they're still really slow. It would definitely be this one's so fascinating, because depending on who wins, like you said, it's either going to be strength on strength, defense on defense, grind it out, or it's going to be a great offense in Pittsburgh versus a great defense in Iowa State, but then the flip of that opposite. So I think I will say this: if Pittsburgh wins, I think they've got a better chance to pull the upset against Iowa State, simply because they'd be going up against a team that's pretty similar to what they just played. It's a nice little practice run. If Mississippi State pulls the upset, it's a little bit different, because now they're playing a team that's completely different style. Either way, though, I do like the way Iowa State played towards the end of the season once they got rid of Grill. I don't know what was going on there, but they looked a lot more competent. They played Kansas pretty well in what was mostly a road game in the Big 12 tournament. They didn't pull it off, but they hung around pretty well. They took it to Baylor twice, even though Baylor was hobbled. At least shows competence from Iowa State. They're at least getting back into form, as opposed to that just terrible, 3-ish weeks or whatever they had. I think Iowa State's the better team. I'm going to stick with them here, even though, like I said, if Pittsburgh wins, that would at least set them up to pull off the upset, given the fact that they would have just seen the team that's very similar to them, to the one they just played.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if Pittsburgh wins, you've got a good offense that's got a game underneath their belt, that's feeling good. I mean, I know it's always a tight travel spot when you're the late one of the first 4, but that could be tough. But I think if it's Mississippi State, it's Iowa State all the way.
Yeah.
Moving on to another hobbled team, we got Xavier, who's not at full strength, and you got Kennesaw State, who upset Liberty and beat Liberty twice on the season. Then once at home, I think both of them at home. It just kind of depends on what you think of this Kennesaw State team, because other than that, I think Xavier walks.
Yeah, Xavier on this one. The model only says they win 3 out of 4 times here. It says they win by an average of about 7 points. But as hobbled as Xavier is, they've played fair, like we talked about. They've played for the most part as well without Fremantle as they did with him. It was a tiny drop, but it's not nearly as much as people are, making it out to be. They're obviously better off with him, but they're not. They've got other pieces that they've worked around, and it's like the opposite of the Castleton situation at Florida, or Miles for TCU. It's one of those where they lost a guy and it didn't just completely derail their season. They're still a much better team than Kennesaw State, who, as much as it's fun to see Cinderellas, Liberty is such a good team. I wish Liberty had gotten an at-large bid. I wish Liberty got in the tournament. I think they could have done some real damage. I think this Liberty team is really good, and to me, it's a shame that Kennesaw State won just because I think Liberty could have been a fun Cinderella, but I don't think Kennesaw State has the horses.
I mean, one of the key ingredients to Cinderella is just a star that's not on. It is much better than the level he's on, and Liberty has one in Darius McGee, who I think dropped 40 again on Kennesaw State in the championship. So he's a stud.
Yep.
It's sad that he's not getting to play here.
100%.
This is one everybody likes to argue about. With Texas A&M, and they were misseeded, and they should be angry, and want to point out that Buzz Williams threw a fit last year about his team not getting in on the public manner and thinks the committee punished him. But I don't think they're that misseeded. They are better than this seed, but if you look at their resume, they won nothing at the beginning of the year when they had a chance. Didn't do it. So I think 7 is the right place to put them.
And that Wofford loss was bad.
Yes. And Penn State playing great at the end of the year. Really struggled there for a bit. This is tough. This is another one where the Big Ten does well in these 7-10 seeds for some reason. Which way are we going here?
No, A&M all the way on this one. I think they're underseeded. With regards to the fact that they're a better team than this, they might be seeded appropriately based off of resume, but with regards to how good they are, they're underseeded. And those are obviously two different things, right? I don't necessarily disagree. They have some really bad losses, but this team has constantly been playing really well. They hung around against Bama, which was, again, pretty impressive to not get blown out of a game that they could have been done by halftime. And they just kind of kept hanging around. Obviously, they couldn't pull it off, but, Alabama's a whole lot better than Penn State. I don't think they'll have that problem here. Model has this as A&M winning by an average of a little over 4, almost, 2 out of 3 times. I think A&M, talent-wise, is at least a top 5 seed, maybe even a top 4 seed, whereas Penn State, I'm not even 100% sure they really deserve to be in this tournament, to be completely honest. So I'm going with the Aggies on this one.
I agree with all those statements. Texas A&M, a lot better than a 7 seed, but didn't earn it. And Penn State, I'm not 100% sure deserves to be in over some of the people that were left out.
Like Liberty.
Yes. Going to a game that 200 might be too low with how these teams like to play. We've got Texas and Colgate. Texas coming off just absolutely waxing Kansas two times inside of a week and having a great Big 12. Seems like they've got their defense going too. And you got Colgate, who dominated the Patriot League, was never challenged.
Yeah, Colgate is a team that, top 10 offense, which is just incredible. Coming from that conference, I've got them as the 8th best offense in the country. Just incredible. It's crazy. Their defense, though, not inside the top 200. Of course, they don't play any defense. Texas is top 15 unit, both offensively and defensively. That makes them a top 10 team. You can't pick Colgate in this one as much as I want to, as much as I think Colgate could pull an upset in the right situation. This Texas team, if their defense hadn't come around, I would say that's going to be the problem, is can they stop Colgate? We saw Texas early on in conference I believe they allowed over 100 points to Kansas State in regulation. If that Texas defense was the Texas defense we had today, oh my goodness, Colgate could keep scoring and they could pull the upset, but that's not the Texas defense we have. Colgate, as good as their offense is going to face a defense infinitely better than any defense they've seen this calendar year, and that's why you just can't pick Colgate in this one. Model says Texas wins almost 80% of the time by about an average of 8 points. That seems about right. They should be favored by 7 to 8 if I had to pick. Colgate's good enough to score and hang around and not get blown out, but it seems really impossible almost for them to pull the upset, just given how bad their defense actually should have no problem scoring.
Yeah, totally agree. Now this is big time. Now, do we need to bring Cousin Jared in for him to talk about this rivalry game? We've got Texas A&M and Texas here.
And my father, my father, the Texas alum, and my cousin, the Texas A&M alum. Yeah, this one, who am I? I've got Texas the 8th best team, A&M is the 15th best team. That sets up to be Texas minus 1.7, and that the Longhorns win this 54% of the time. That's pretty close to a coin toss. I could see anything happening in this game. You have a Texas team that's going to want to play a little bit faster. A&M is going to try to suck the air out of the ball. My goodness, there is no love lost between these two universities. If you know anything about the history and how the conference chasing has happened, and it's this one's going to be a fascinating matchup. I'm going to go with the Aggies on this one. I don't trust Texas fully. I know I talked about the Big 12. I do think they're a really good conference, but I think that this A&M team is equipped to beat almost any team in the country outside of the top ones, and I'm just not convinced Texas is there. We also have the added caveat that we don't know about Timmy Allen. We don't know if he'll be 100%. The university's saying he will be, but that's the asterisk you have to remember if you're taking Texas deep in your brackets here. As good as this Texas team is, he's a big piece to lose. I know it didn't matter that they didn't have him in the conference tournament, but don't get fooled by that, because remember, we saw Oklahoma State look great those first 3 games without Avery Anderson. So I think this is a pretty toss-up game. I think Texas should be favored, but I'm not sure by how much. This is one of those where I think if it happens, we're going to be on A&M at some big plus odds, and I think anything can happen in it. So I'm gonna be forward thinking with our gambling picks here that we're probably going to make and say the Aggies have got a chance to pull this off, and I'll back them here.
Yeah, like they've got a roadmap with how Tennessee and a couple other defensive first teams really gave Texas fits and even beat them. It's just, does their offense score enough as their defense slows Texas down? I think they do. It's going to be tough. It should be a fun game.
Yeah.
We've got Iowa State and Xavier coming up, and that's going to be another – I mean, we got a lot of Big 12 teams here, and deservedly so, but the top of the Big East was very, very good. Even with Fremantle out, Xavier still had a great offense, played a little better defense than most expected. Does Iowa State have the counter to Xavier's offense?
I'm going to go Iowa State here. I think I like the way they played lately. I just think they're at least as good as Xavier models as coin toss, but I like this Iowa State defense, and the fact that they've got it going the right direction now as of late gives me enough confidence that I think they can pull the upset here and beat Xavier.
All right.
Well, I assume it'll be the upset because I assume Xavier will be favored.
Yeah, I would think so too. We've got Indiana versus Drake. Is Drake going to be the 12 seed that slides into the Sweet 16 that gets the winner of Houston-Auburn, or is IU finally going back to the second weekend for the first time in a long time?
I'll go Drake again. I'll say that they can pull this off. This is pretty close to a coin toss. Model would have Indiana winning this by 2, wins this 55% of the time. But, anything can happen in these games that's this close. I mean, you're talking about if they win by an average of 1.9 points, I mean, it's literally one ball hits the rim, and then it now it's a tie game, right? So I think Drake's good enough to do it. I think this is a really even matchup offensively and defensively. Obviously, if Indiana was fully healthy, it's a different story, but they're not, right? And that, I think, is enough to let Drake hang around. Drake has that winning pedigree. They know how to do it, and I think they can pull it off.
Yep. I like the pick. I mean, I'm just sensing an anti-Big Ten sentiment out of you. So, I mean, maybe go a little easier on our Big Ten friends. But now we've got –
I lived in Indianapolis for 5 years. I liked it. I don't hate the Big Ten. I just don't think they're very good at basketball. That's all.
Stick to football is what you're hearing. All right. So we've got Houston and Auburn, who two very good football teams. Would have been a much closer.
Didn't these two
football
teams
matchup.
Play in a bowl game recently? I'm pretty sure I remember that.
I think so.
Last year?
Auburn not so good this year, but typically these would be decent football matchup. But I'm not sure this is a great basketball matchup. You've got defense, and maybe somebody scores.
Yeah, the model would project this at 123.5 points. Houston winning 65% of the time by an average of a little over 4. I'll take Houston here. Model loves Auburn, but the model doesn't love Auburn enough to even think that they can really realistically pull this off. Even if Houston's not 100%, they should be able to get by an Auburn team that, like you said, really struggles to score sometimes.
Yeah, they just disappear offensively. So we're going to stick with Houston. And now, how much do you love Drake? Is Drake going to even give Houston a battle? Because this could be a bad Sweet 16 matchup if it goes the wrong way for Drake.
By this point, I'm assuming Sasser is healthy. That would make Houston about a 10-point favorite in this one. And this is one where if you're in a survivor pool, this would be a great time to have Houston in your back pocket, because I think they might be one of the biggest favorites on the board for the Sweet 16 around here, and I can't pick against Houston in this spot.
So now, does Texas A&M take out a second Big 12 team on their way to the Elite Eight? Or does Iowa State cut a player off their team who was a great scorer and make it to the Elite Eight.
No, I think A&M would get them in this one. This would be an interesting matchup, whether it's Texas or Texas A&M, if Iowa State gets there, because then it's either, former conference rivals or actual two teams in the same conference, which tend to not set up at this point in the tournament. They tend to play more in the Elite Eight, not the Sweet 16. But I would go with A&M here. As much as I like the way Iowa State's played as of late, this A&M team's been just a phenomenal team to back, other than a couple of road spots, and I think they'd be the team to back in this one too. Model would say they win by an average of 3 and win about 60% of the time, and I think it's probably a little bit higher than that. I think this A&M team is just really good.
I agree. I mean, I promise Cousin Jared doesn't pay us anything to say all these good things about Texas A&M. He's probably actually hating it. Now we've got the king of Texas is what I'm going to determine this game, because Texas A&M would have gone through two Texas schools here to get to this number. Are we taking Houston or Texas A&M?
This is fascinating, of course, because the Final Four is being held in Houston, right? So, the winner of this game is going to get, somewhat of a home game if they were to make it to the Final Four, because the Aggies would fill that place up, and obviously Houston being right there, they would have a lot of fans as well. The model would make this, assuming Sasser's healthy, Houston by somewhere between 5 and 6 and winning more than 2 out of 3 times. I'm going to stick with Houston in this spot. I just think that the analytics are saying that they can compete with the top teams across the country, and I'm going to trust the math that we've built. There's a reason why we think they're the best team in the country, and it's not about their record, because obviously like a Charleston has only 3 losses as well, right? It's about the way they've done it, and the fact that the way they've beat those the 80th best team in the country and the 100th best team in the country and the 200th best team in the country tends to translate to doing well against the better teams. And so I'm just going to stick to that and say, as much as I like the way this A&M team is played, it's really hard to go against a Houston team that I just have to think, if they are fully healthy, if Sasser's back, is one of the top teams, if not the top team in college basketball.
I mean, they were an Elite Eight team last year, down 2 or 3 starters. This time they might only be down 1, so maybe
or none, maybe
Final Four. Yeah, none. I mean,
if things work out right,
yeah, it's looking better.
Yeah.
So now we're going to move on to the last region and the West region, and we've got Kansas versus Howard. Congratulations, Howard! You made it to the tournament first time in like 50 years.
Good job.
Thank you for coming. I'm just going to go ahead and move Kansas there.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about this Arkansas-Illinois game, which is should be a great game. Depending on which Illinois shows up, because Illinois could lose by 100 or win by 100, depending on which team they show up and which Arkansas team shows up.
Yeah,
which one are you betting on?
The model says 71-71, 50-50 game right here. So this is truly a situation where the model helps us none. Pace-wise, these two teams are pretty similar. They both play pretty fast. They both have decent offenses, but better defenses. I mean, these two teams are kind of similar to each other. I mean, you never really know which team's going to show up which way. I'll go Illinois just because I think when everything is said and done, I think they've got better scorers who can get it done than Arkansas does. That Arkansas, and both teams have been relying on their defense. I think Illinois has got more upside on their starters, but both these teams are pretty good, and either one of these teams could win, and it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, they're both going to have a hard time with Kansas, of course, but this should be a good matchup. I really do think coin toss game is pretty accurate. What the model says, I tend to agree.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You finally picked the Big Ten team.
I had to at some point. Maybe I should have said that. The reason I'm picking a big team is so I didn't just pick against all of them.
But also, if you're an Arkansas fan, you've got to think of what this year could have been, what you were with, and then all the injuries and stuff.
Yep.
It's got to burn. But moving on, now we've got St. Mary's, who for the second year in a row is a 5th seed, who absolutely murdered Indiana last time in this spot. Do they do the same to VCU, who kind of surprised people with how they came on late and kind of handled their business throughout the conference, and especially in the conference tournament?
Yeah, I've got VCU at 37. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I don't really feel, Jake, were they on your radar at all this season until the very end? I feel like I wasn't even paying attention to them at all. I didn't think they were, going to be that good. And all of a sudden, we kind of got towards, the last month and it was like, hey, this team's actually pretty solid. I feel like they just snuck up on me personally. I don't know if you feel that way.
Yeah, I didn't think they were good. I thought we were getting good numbers on them, so we played them quite a bit. But I didn't think they were good enough to be here, and now here they are, and in a very, I don't know, it could be a good 12 seed to pick.
Yeah, they have the recipe for the upset, which is a top 15 defense. Offense isn't bad; it's not good by any stretch of the imagination. But they do that one thing, which is defense, and when you do that one thing really well, it gives you a chance against anybody. The problem with them going up against St. Mary's is that St. Mary's defense is still better and their offense is better. I've got St. Mary's as the 11th best team. It's really hard for me to pick against the St. Mary's team, who I think is criminally underseeded. I thought that last year, and I'll say it again this year. The St. Mary's team should have been a 3 seed. I don't know why they're, at minimum a 4 seed. I don't know why they're sitting where they are. I'm going St. Mary's.
All right. So now we're going to go to UConn and Iona. Do the rumors about Rick Pitino moving on to St. John's or Georgetown mess up this Iona team who just absolutely dominated their conference? Or do we get good or bad UConn? Do we get the good UConn that just destroyed teams at the beginning and end of the year? Or do we get the one that showed up in the middle that was getting beat by everybody?
I mean, I was riding this UConn team towards the end of the season, and I don't see any reason to change. They've come as the third best team in the country. I think that midseason swoon was gone. They're back peaking at the right time. Obviously, they were playing probably a little bit better early on in the season, but this last part of the season, they played really well, almost won the conference championship in a really tough Big East, and, no shame in the way they ended up losing and who they lost to. At that point, they're just really good. I like Iona. I don't think they're bad, but I've got them at 52nd. They don't really do any one thing that I think is going to frustrate UConn. I mean, their offense is good for a mid-major and their defense is good for a mid-major, but neither one's a top 30 unit or even a top 40 unit according to the model. So I just don't see them giving UConn enough problems. This UConn team is just so physically talented. They should be able to have their way with a team like Iona.
Yeah, I mean, UConn's downfall is if their guards don't play well because they've got the size, they've got the beat, they've got the strength. It's just if they don't get good play out of their guards, they can get beat. Don't think Iona's the team that's really going to force their guards into bad play.
Yeah, it feels like one of those games talked about earlier, right? The model says UConn by 9.6, and one of those where, if things go right for them, they can win by 15. If things go wrong, it's still hard to see them they won't cover, but it's hard to see them still not pulling it off by something like 4, even if things go wrong. They've just got too many options to score against a team like Iona.
Yep. So going back to the Big 12, we've got TCU and whatever is happening there. And we've got Arizona State versus Nevada coming through, two teams that were very questionable if they should have been in or not. In my opinion, neither one of them should have, but that's neither here nor there.
It's interesting. We often have a team that is questionably, should they even be in the tournament, in that 11 play-in game, and then they end up winning the first game, and then sometimes they win another game, and it's like, well, I mean, it doesn't really matter if you should or shouldn't have been in, because once you're in, you go out and play. So the problem with that, thinking about that here, is it's easy to identify that in hindsight, but in foresight, like, I'm like you. I don't think either one of those teams is that good. I don't think they should have been here. I think they're going to be really overmatched. I'll take TCU. Model says they'd win this against either opponent by somewhere between 4 and 5 points. And another 2 out of 3 type favorite. This TCU team is, again, really good if they're fully healthy. They don't have Lampkin, so that's going to affect them. I don't think it matters in this game. I think that matters further down the road.
Yeah. Now, moving on to a team that's very dear to my heart this year after cashing in that plus $1,200 ticket. Plus 1,200 ticket there we got for Grand Canyon. I love them. Gonzaga, I don't like because they're playing against Grand Canyon. Who do we have here?
I mean, it's Gonzaga. There's no reason to overthink this one. Grand Canyon is a great story, but their defense is terrible. Gonzaga's going to put up 100 points in this game if they want to. Grand Canyon's going to try to slow them down, and that's the only reason it won't get to 100 if it doesn't. But otherwise, Gonzaga just is going to be able to score as much as they want against just such a bad defense in Grand Canyon by easily in the bottom half of college basketball.
Yeah, they put it together in the conference tournament. Gonzaga has been putting it together in the second half of the year everywhere. You saw that in how they beat St. Mary's in the conference championship and beat St. Mary's in the second matchup. I think if you've got them playing great at the right time, we'll see how that
Model
goes on.
says Gonzaga by 17, and this is one where I think they might win by 30. I mean, we talk about sometimes these 1 and 2 seeds sometimes just dominate this first round game. And the way we saw from Gonzaga, the back part of the season, they took it to those teams in the West Coast Conference. And a lot of those teams they beat by 30 were better than this Grand Canyon team. So, I mean, there's a real chance that they just lay it on. And the backups for Gonzaga are still probably better than what Grand Canyon's got. They've just got so much depth and talent that the backups are going to come in and keep scoring. I mean, I think this one's going to get ugly.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now we got your favorite conference versus your least favorite conference. We've got Northwestern versus Boise State. Does the Mountain West win out, or are we finally picking a Big Ten team here?
Northwestern was such a good story. Obviously, we talked a lot about like the fact that they're actually decent is kind of crazy. I feel like Boise was a team that every time we thought that they wouldn't do well, they did. And so, they're kind of a little bit of a zig and zag team for us here. But, this is an interesting matchup in that, you've got two good defenses, and Boise State's offense, I guess, is better than Northwestern's. They play a little faster, but overall, two teams that are relatively similar to each other. Northwestern does it a little bit more defensively, but Boise State's defense is still their best unit. So two defensive-minded teams, two teams that aren't really going to play that fast. Again, Boise plays faster only really by comparison. The model projects this total to be 124. So, I mean, we're expecting a very boring basketball game, slow defensive minded, that sort of thing. Model says Boise State 52% of the time, but this basically just makes it a pick 'em. So we just got to figure out who we think is going to win. I'm going to go with Northwestern. I think that they've been playing really well as of late. And I just, as much as I like a lot of teams in the Mountain West, Boise State was just never a team I really fully trusted.
Chris Collins not only going to bring them to their first tournament a few years ago, and now he's going to get their first win.
It's done.
Professor Sides here. All right, so now we got UCLA, UNC Asheville. UCLA. I mean, the only part to talk about this is UCLA's injuries. How healthy are they? Covering. It's going to be. I don't know. I mean, they're the better team, but
yeah,
it's a different story.
UNC Asheville's ranked 160th in the model. There's even a hobbled UCLA team wins this. Jalen Clark being out really hurts UCLA. The other guy being 50-50, I guess at this point, I don't really know what he is. And this is another situation where before you fill out exactly how deep you take UCLA, knowing if he's healthy or not matters, because he's another top 50 player, just like Jalen Clark was for UCLA. And at some point, those injuries taking a toll. Fully healthy, UCLA is a top 5 team according to the model. With the current injury status, I've got them at 19th now. So, I mean, that just does a real number on them. It won't affect them in this game. Model says they win this by an average of 12 still, so they'll still handle UNC Asheville. But it would affect how deep you want to take them based off of if you think they're going to be healthy, a little bit healthy. We know Clark won't be there, but if that's the only injury they've got, it's a little bit more tenable than if they've got two of their best players out.
All right, and moving on, now we've got Northwestern versus that same UCLA team. Is Northwestern good enough, decent enough to make UCLA bow out early, or does UCLA still limp their way into the Sweet 16?
I think UCLA still gets there. As much as we talk about the injuries, they still handle their business in the Pac-12 tournament. They gave Arizona everything they wanted in that title game, and Northwestern, to me, profiles more like one of the decent Pac-12 schools that UCLA was able to handle. I just don't think Northwestern is good enough to take advantage of UCLA's injuries. I think there are a lot of teams in the tournament that are. I'm just not sure Northwestern is it. Unfortunately, if you're wanting UCLA to be out, again, there's teams that can take advantage of it. I'm just not sure it's them. So I still think UCLA gets done. They're still good enough, hobbled, to win this. Model says they'd win it about 2 out of 3 times, and I don't see Northwestern being able to get it done.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Northwestern's just not got the horses to keep up here. I mean, this UCLA team is very good, and they're not just based around the 1 or 2 players. They're a solid team. Yeah. Our next matchup, we got TCU versus Gonzaga. This is where I think the missing Lampkin for TCU really hurts. But What's your
Absolutely.
opinion on this?
Absolutely. The model would have Gonzaga by 8 here and that they win this 80% of the time. If Lampkin's there, I think Gonzaga would be favored, but not by nearly as much. And I think TCU then has a real interesting matchup opportunity with them having Lampkin as a big guy, of course, against Timmy. And they're two very different players. So, I mean, it makes it real interesting to see how they battle each other. But without Lampkin, I think that really hurts TCU here. I love the way Gonzaga's been playing as of late. I've got them up to the 5th best team in the country. And I think there should be a lot of pace, a lot of points, but Gonzaga pulls away and gets this one done, gets the win here.
Yeah, I agree. I think Lampkin makes all the difference because Lampkin's the kind of post Timmy doesn't like, big physical guy that wants to bang, since he can't take advantage of him that way. But now Lampkin's not there, so Timmy should have a great game.
Yep.
Now we got St. Mary's and UConn. We got the 4-5 matchup, which you love both these teams. You got top tier sideline teams. Which one's pulling it out?
I do. This one hurts my heart. I mentioned, like I said, I hadn't looked at the bracket. Had I looked at the bracket, I would have looked at this and been like, why are we doing this early? This is like an Elite Eight game, whatever. Not here in the first weekend. UConn, I've got 3rd. St. Mary's 11th. Both these are top 10 defenses. The difference in this one, I got to go UConn. UConn's got a top 10 offense, and St. Mary's doesn't. I think St. Mary's can do a lot of things to frustrate a lot of teams and pull off the upset against so many teams in the country because of how slow they play, how good a defense they play. But UConn, I think, isn't going to be bothered by it. They're so balanced. UConn is perfectly happy playing a slow it down, grind it out game. As much as I love St. Mary's, I just think this UConn team it's built to take advantage of it. Their size is going to overpower them. As much as I love St. Mary's, it's got to be UConn here. Model says they win about 60% of the time, but I think it's probably a little bit higher than that. This UConn team is, like I said, I think they're playing pretty well at the right time of year.
Yeah, this is a matchup I have to look into more. I would lean UConn, but St. Mary's is good enough to make that a very tough call.
Yeah.
Kind of hope I don't have to make it because I don't want to have to pick that game when we're picking winners.
Right.
So here's for hoping that one of those teams screws up. But so now we've got Kansas versus Illinois, and does Illinois get it together twice in a row to take out a Kansas team, or does Kansas keep rolling, keep playing well, and figures out enough defense to get through this?
Yeah, the McCullough injury, maybe that mattered a little bit more than we thought. It's tough because Kansas does have some depth, but, the model is kind of seeing what happened there and knowing that he's questionable for the tournament drops him down to the 14th best team. It's probably a little bit lower than they should be. But, when you saw him get thumped like they did against Texas, it does make you wonder exactly how much his impact is. I think Kansas gets it done here, but I think that they're a team that, you wonder if they peaked a little early. I'm not really sure. I don't think I'm quite as sold on them. They have an incredible resume, and I don't want that to be, mistaken by they shouldn't be a 1 seed because their resume is worthy of the 1 seed. Absolutely. But I'm just not convinced that they're 1 seed caliber, especially if they aren't fully healthy. They've got a couple of their depth guys also banged up. I think they could beat Illinois. Model says they'd only be favored by 2.2, but if it was really a 2-point spread, I'd be laying the 2 with Kansas in a heartbeat. I think they can win, but I just am not sure that they're going to go as deep as most people think they are.
Yeah, I think I agree, especially moving into this next matchup. Kansas-UConn is very interesting because UConn's got the defense, got the size, got depth to throw at them. Does Kansas get Wilson and Grady Dick showing up? Because Grady Dick disappears at times. He's struggling to find his shot, but when he's on, he is on. He's put up tons of points against really good teams in the Big 12. So this game should be a blast. Which way you leaning on this one?
I've got UConn here. The model would say they win about 60% of the time, and I don't think that's what we will get. I think we probably would get a line that's closer to a pick'em in this game, but I would love UConn anything near a pick'em. I think they're the better team. Like I said, I just think this UConn team is on a roll. We've seen how dominant they can be. I think, we're not going to have all 4 number 1 seeds make it to the Final Four, and I think Kansas is going to have a hard time doing it with UConn in front of them.
Yeah. This next one, I've got an interesting theory on.
Let me add too. Even if it's St. Mary's, I think St. Mary's stylistically can provide some problems for Kansas too. I think Kansas can have a really tough time with this game, whichever team it is.
Totally agree. Here's my theory on this. Do you think the last 1 seed, which I think is Purdue, they gave Purdue that 1 seed to keep UCLA out west, throw them an extra bone because they weren't going to overtake Kansas?
It's always possible. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I think the West is being played out in Las Vegas, which is besides UConn, these three teams have got fairly easy travel to.
Yeah.
But this should be an absolute intense game with Gonzaga and UCLA. Does UCLA's injuries finally catch up to them, or does Gonzaga lose their offense?
I think the injuries cost them here. I think a fully healthy UCLA team wins this game, and I think it's a heavyweight battle. I think a fully healthy UCLA, this is like a Final Four matchup, a national championship caliber matchup. Jalen Clark matters a lot to this UCLA team. It really affects how the model views them. I love the way Gonzaga is playing right now. I think Gonzaga gets it done. I've got them winning this by an average of about 5 points. As much as I like UCLA, they're just not the same team right now that they were, 3 weeks ago.
This is very true. That sucks when that injury happens. It's like the Ziegler injury because, man, it really changes how the postseason goes.
Yeah.
Now we've got Gonzaga versus UConn for the final.
Another game that if this was the national title game, I would be thrilled. And it's still in the regional. This is my third and fifth best teams right here in UConn and Gonzaga, again, with current rosters. So, I mean, this would be basically a coin toss game. The model would favor UConn slightly. I'm going to stick with UConn just because I think they're the more balanced team, as good of an offense as Gonzaga has. You talked about it earlier, right? Timmy's going to have a hard time with physicality, and UConn's got some bigs down low that can really bang them, and they got a smart coach there, UConn. If they're not, they know exactly what they've got to do. They've got the guys to do it. They've got multiple guys, so they can even worry. They don't have to worry about fouls. So, I mean, UConn I feel like, is built to beat this Gonzaga team. So, as much as I like Gonzaga, I just think this is a terrible matchup for them. So, I would be taking UConn here. Something like -1, like the model says in the heartbeat. I think they can get it done.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that swoon in the middle of the season actually helped UConn out, get a easier route. I know the St. Mary's game's not easy, but besides that, they've got the matchups work in their favor, and I think it really helps them get to the Final Four here. And now we're going to move on to the Final Four, which our first one we've got UConn and Houston. Which team does sideline love more?
In Houston. I mean, this is Houston's ranked second, UConn's ranked third. Houston would probably be up to first if Sasser is healthy. So, but I mean, when you talk about UConn and Houston and Alabama right there too, I mean, it's really, we're talking coin toss games. Duke would be the one that's a little bit behind it with regards to the model projections. But, UConn, Houston, and Alabama are all right there. So, I mean, we're talking straight up coin toss. Should be a great game. UConn's going to be the trendy pick at this point, I think. And I can't blame it just because of, the talent they've got. I think about this Houston team, and I'm thinking back to 2 years ago, a couple of the same guys, similar players, a lot of talent, that Houston team that made the Final Four. And they just got thumped by a Baylor team that was just able to out-physical them, just had just so much talent. That's kind of how I view this UConn team. I think there's only a handful of teams that can really handle Houston and what they do. I think UConn's one of them, so I'd pick UConn here.
Oh, wow. We got the Huskies in the national championship.
Yep.
So now we get to move up here to Alabama Duke. Does Alabama's offense and defense handle everything Duke's got, or is Duke going to be able to slow it down enough and score in the paint enough to keep Alabama out of the championship?
Yeah, it would be a clash of styles here. Of course, Alabama playing fast, Duke playing slow. I got Alabama here. I just think they're so dang good. Model would have this Alabama by about 4.5, and says they could win 2 out of 3 times. And as much as I like what I've seen from Duke, this Alabama team, I think, is a buzzsaw.
Unfortunately, that gives Alabama a chance at a championship, which I was hoping we were able to deprive them this year of any championships. They get to hang a banner now in basketball, and that's going to be frustrating. So now we've got Alabama versus UConn. You've kind of hinted that Alabama's your pick, but does the matchup change anything for you?
I mean, this would be a dream matchup if we got to Alabama UConn. I mean, there's so many great matchups that we can get out of this. There's no one dominant team, right? But yeah, if we get to Alabama UConn, I'm going Alabama. I think they're the best team in the country, and I think they can get it done. The fact that Alabama, plays so fast, can score so much, but still has the number 1 ranked defense in the country according to the model. I mean, that just says a lot. I think they're one of the few teams that can handle UConn's size and physicality. Otherwise, I think UConn's going to have a great run. I just think that Bama is the team I want to be behind here.
I like the pick. I'm leaning that way. Do you want to put your sideline total in here?
What am I picking? Am I picking each team's score?
Yeah. Final score.
Yeah, the model would say 144.5, so 72.5 to 72. So let's make this final score prediction 73 to 68. I'm going to go on.
I like it. All right. So there we are. We're going to hit submit here. And that is our bracket guy.
There you go. I feel like we've earned like a steak dinner after going through that.
Yes, I would love one.
I need like a a vocal cord massage or something to handle that. All right.
Hey, you know what? For y'all here in Indy, I'm headed to the beefsteak on Friday. Going to eat all that St. Elmo's food and drinks, and it's going to be great watching games.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, after all that, Jake, I know you'd be happy if unhappy if Bama were to win. Other than that, did I pass? Did I get a passing grade?
I think you did a great job. I think there's some great picks in here. I think it's going to be. I think your problem in winning a bracket is you chose a very common champion. But
yeah,
other than that,
yeah, and maybe that's it. Maybe I should have gone UConn because maybe not a lot of people are picking UConn. I guess.
Yep.
in
Sometimes these bigger bracket pools, that's what you have to do is go, I got to go put the opposite here.
And I think whoever's actually still watching this by now, I feel like we've talked for like 9 hours. If you're still with us now, I think that's the key point to remember. How many people are you competing against? If you're competing against 10 people in a pool and there's a lot of 15 people, picking a team like Alabama isn't bad. And you can probably win even if Alabama wins based on the fact that you can get some other picks right if you got more Final Four teams, that sort of thing. If you're in a really big pool, you're going to need to pick a little bit more of a unique winner. And so, yeah, if you're in a bigger pool, a team like UConn, I think, is a great team to look at. The size, the physicality. I'm not sure a lot of people are going to pick them because that number next to their name, I don't think is representative of how good they are. It's representative of their resume because that midseason swing we talked about, but that midseason team is nothing like the team that we've seen the last month, from UConn.
Yep, totally agree.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Picks with the Professor. Don't forget to subscribe so you can ensure all the sports betting content from this channel dropped right into your feed. And get me back all week with March Madness content. But until we see you again, as always, best of luck. And remember, you can eat your betting money, but please don't bet your eating money.